So you need to get a more camera-worthy bottle. I think
I
you
know.
go
I try and always sip to the side, but I forget.
sit to the side, Sue.
It's like side saddle.
Well, welcome everyone back to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. This is a podcast where two exes, me and Josh, talk about life, music, pop culture, trauma, aging, Lady Gaga, and everything else. So, how are you, Josh?
I'm okay, thanks, Sean. I'm a bit tired. I got back from Leeds yesterday. I spent a few days up there visiting our friend Anna, aka Sue, and
One of the Sues.
one of the Sues, exactly. And I got back yesterday afternoon. So I mean, I'm not exhausted or anything, but you know how traveling, just at this age, traveling does sort of take it out of you a little bit.
Well, it's a very, I don't know, it feels a little bit of a privileged concern to have, doesn't it? Like being worn out from travel and not worn out from working like a 14-hour shift in a hospital or something.
It
But
does, but that 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 said, I think it still is a legitimate thing to say. Traveling does kind of tire you at this age.
yeah, what was happening in Leeds then?
Well, you know, I was supposed to go up in February and I couldn't because I had like the flu slash bronchitis episode. So this was just a rescheduled thing. So I went up on Thursday and came back yesterday. 4 days up in Leeds, and it just so happened because when I was supposed to go up in February, of course, I was supposed to go and see Here You Come Again, the Dolly inspired musical with Anna.
Hmm.
And of course, I didn't. And if regular viewers or listeners probably are familiar with the story of how my ticket went to someone else, and anyway, that's a whole another saga. But it just so happened that this weekend that I was going up, there was a Dolly impersonator playing in. It was just outside of Leeds. It was sort of, oh, what was it called? I think it's Horsforth. I think towards Bradford, that sort of area.
Okay.
Um, and she was amazing. So I have to tell you all about her in a minute.
Well, what
But
was the venue?
it was just in one of these sort of old mills that has been converted. It was called the Old Woolen, and it's a mill, and it was packed. I mean, it was absolutely packed, and she was amazing. Like she's Australian. She's called Kelly O'Brien, and she honestly just. I'm Anna and I are going to go and see her again. I think Anna's going to come down to London. She's playing a place in Soho in the summer, and she's also playing Bush Hall in West London.
Where is she
Um,
playing in Soho?
I can't remember. I didn't recognize that. I mean, I don't really go out in Soho these days, so I don't know what the cool hotspots are. But she's playing somewhere in Soho, and she's also playing Bush Hall. So we were going to say if you wanted to come along, I think you'd really enjoy it because she just. I mean, I was sober. I wasn't drinking or anything on Saturday night when we went, and even then, like I sort of a few moments during the show, I forgot that it was an impersonator. Um, it was just she's so good at what she does. She sounds just like her. The banter in between songs, the little laughs and everything. Even sort of I was talking to Sue, Anna Sue, about it, and we were saying even her hand gestures and her eye, like you know how Dolly does a bit of side eye, like
Yeah.
so all of those things. She's just got them down so well. That you kind of lose yourself in the performance, and she stays in character, obviously, the whole
Yeah.
show. So yeah, she was very good,
And does
very
she
very
have a
good.
live band?
Yep, really good band. It was great. It was great. You should come, Sue. You'd love it.
Maybe that could be one of your adventures in being a professional musician. You could try and get a job in Kelly O'Brien's Dolly band.
It was what?
Get a job as a musician in Kelly O'Brien's Dolly band.
Maybe. I don't think I'm good enough. They're all really, really, really good. Like amazing. And it was funny. At one point, she got someone from the audience up to sing "Islands in the Stream" with her, and I mean, he was quite awful. It was everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people were just sort of booing because I mean, he was like very, very intoxicated, and B, he didn't really know the song well, and C, he couldn't hit a note. So Yeah, a lot of
And what
people in
was
the
the crowd
audience
like?
would
Was
boo.
it like real Dolly fans or just people who've gone out because they knew a couple of songs?
It was a mix. It was a mix. It was lots and like a surprising amount of lesbians, like lesbian couples. Um, like we got talking to like four different lesbian couples. I mean, it was. I don't know if that's her audience, maybe, or I don't know if that is that a Dolly audience. I mean, obviously, I know Dolly's got a lot of gay men fans, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I've never thought about whether Dolly has a strong lesbian
I mean, maybe
fanship.
the venue you were in is queer friendly or known for hosting things that are
Maybe, yeah.
queer adjacent, and also maybe that part of the country is a bit of a lesbian haven. You know how, well, is it, what's that other town that is known as like a lesbian,
Oh, Hebden Bridge, the lesbian
Hebden Bridge?
capital of the UK. Yeah, that's true,
Yeah,
and
so
that's
maybe,
that was just down the road.
yeah, so maybe you're in a bit of
Yeah, that's true.
a lesbian hotspot.
I don't know. Is there also? I mean, I'm so out of touch with what whatever the scene is these days. But like, is there a big lesbian like line dancing scene in the UK or in the North or? be-
Uh, I don't know about that.
Because there are a lot of a lot of lesbian couples were doing the whole line dancing thing as well. So
What, while the Dolly Parton
no,
was
like
singing?
in before she came on, and then there was an interval, and while she did a costume change, and lots of people were line dancing, and Anna and I tried to join in, but obviously we don't know what we're doing.
And what music were they playing that people were line dancing to?
Oh, like steps, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well, this sounds like a queer venue.
Shania Twain.
Yeah, this sounds like a gay.
I don't think it was a queer venue. Though. I mean, there were lots of straight people there too, but there was a very, very noticeable contingent of
And
gays
don't
and
you
lesbians.
find in places like that aren't big enough queer communities to host queer exclusive venues,
Hmm.
things are a lot more mixed? You know,
Yeah,
like
true.
you get people going out and like you'll have queer friendly venues, but it's less segregated because people
Well, yeah, there
are
just isn't enough of
no.
a queer population, yeah, like you say, to support an exclusively queer. I
So
think I've got a feeling the venue she's playing in Soho is a queer venue. I can't
yeah.
remember why. I think maybe something to do with the name, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head,
Was it like
unfortunately.
gay as fuck or
Mm,
something?
mm.
Fuck me in the ass bar and grill.
I don't know. Like feel, I don't know. I know this is wrong, but I want to say it's got like some play on the word suck in it, like SUQ or something. But it's
SUQ.
yeah, like suck or I don't know.
Sick.
I could be totally off on that. It could be not that at
Succulent.
all, and it could not
Succulent.
even be a queer venue. I could have been reading into it.
Are you
But
sure it's definitely in Soho?
yes, yes,
So you post some stuff on social media?
yeah. I posted a few videos in my
Because I
Insta
was
stories.
looking over Hill's shoulder and he was watching some of the videos
Oh yeah.
and he was saying to me, why didn't we go and see Dolly? And I was like, what? And he was
Hmm.
like, Josh is seeing Dolly Parton. And I said, that's not the real Dolly Parton. He's like, yes, it is. Look. And he was like
Yeah,
watching the video and he
yeah.
was so convinced that it was really Dolly.
A few people thought it was, and I mean, even like I said, even I thought it was for a few moments there. I just lost myself in it, and it was. I mean, she was. I would go and see her every time. I think she's great, really, really good.
And what was Leeds like in general? Like, did you get up to anything else in Leeds?
Well, it's funny. No, I don't think I didn't go into the centre of Leeds at all, actually, because Anna's lives in Meanwood now with her boyfriend, and just stuck mostly to Meanwood. We went over to York on Sunday, and we saw Deborah. Met up with Deborah. Met her dog Fiona, which was nice. We had lunch. They've got like the like Box Park. Those container shipping
Yeah.
container things. They've got one in York now called Spark, I think it's called, and there's a little vegan kitchen in there.
Well, we
So
went to a box park thing in York a long time ago.
no, I think you did. I think, and I was trying to remember when I was talking to Deborah on Sunday, who are those brewers that we knew up in York? That
Oh, they were.
that couple.
Yeah, I
What
can't remember the
was it?
name of.
Was it Brass Castle?
No, Brass Castle is up in Yorkshire, but
But
no, it
that's a
was a
big brewery, isn't it?
yeah, it was a different one. What was it called? And they came down and did the vegan beer
Yeah,
festival
really nice, weren't they? I
in
can't remember their
London.
names though.
and yeah, I can't remember, but it was kind of on the way between Leeds and York.
Not in.
It was
Was it
like,
Tadcaster?
well, isn't that where um,
That's that's where what's it called is based.
Samuel Smith pubs is?
Yeah,
Isn't that from
yeah.
there? But I can't remember.
No, I can picture them. Like he had a beard. I
Yeah,
know it doesn't
I
really.
think his name was Chris,
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. And I
and
remember them telling us, like, I don't know, a decade ago that York was getting one of these container things and that there was going to be a vegan place. But I don't think I ever went. But you think you've been?
yeah, I definitely went.
You must have
Um,
gone without me then.
but I can't remember how or when I would have gone there. But there was like maybe there was that vegan kebab chain that
Oh, yeah. What was it? It was like a play on a Donna Summer.
yeah,
Do-
like yeah,
yeah, Donna
Donna Summer,
Donna
right?
like
But
Donna
instead of
Summer.
Donna, it was Donna.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's right. I think they had a branch there, didn't they?
yeah. I can't remember what that
The
that
brewery.
brewery was called.
Yeah, I'm sure we could find out. What about you? How's your weekend? I know you messaged me last night saying you've been watching some videos on YouTube.
Well, sometimes the algorithm knows me too well, Sue, and it sends me videos that are distressing but also very watchable. So I don't know why, but there was this documentary that got suggested to me. Not a documentary, it was a segment on 60 Minutes, the US version of 60 Minutes, the current affairs show. And it was talking about 9/11 and how it's like, what, 25 years since 9/11, right?
Well, next year will be, won't it? Wasn't it 2001?
Oh, yeah. So almost 25 years. And it was interviewing some people whose family were killed during those attacks and how, I mean, this is a bit grim and this is maybe a trigger warning for people, but a lot of people's remains were never located because the building collapse pulverized everything, including people.
Hmm.
But the government set up an arm of the government to dig through rubble and collect all of the rubble and the remains from the building and to study all of the fragments, dust particles, everything until they made a pledge that they would try and um, find DNA from everybody who was killed there. And so there was this woman whose husband died, and weeks went by, months went by, and he was missing. And over 20 years later, the police came to her door and said they've finally determined some samples,
Wow.
DNA,
God.
and we're talking about some of these things are like fragments of like a bone or
Yeah.
and she was very upset, of course, and had never stopped being upset, but also like her life had not moved on but had progressed. Like she was married to somebody else and she'd originally had a child with the man who died, and then since then she got remarried and had two more children.
Hmm.
And her first child was only, I think, 18 months old when his father died during 9/11. And so she said it was more meaningful for her son that he felt like that his father's life was worth something that people had kept looking for 20 years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what do you think is the motivation for the government wanting to do that instead of just saying, okay, like if someone goes missing at sea, they don't keep looking for 20 years. Like,
Yeah. I
what is
don't
the
know what.
motivation?
Presumably, when there is no body found, well, my understanding of it, although I don't have any direct sort of experience, but my understanding is that they can't legally declare someone dead for a certain period of time if there is no body found. And in my head, I'm like, I think it's like 3, 5 years or something like that. And then after that, someone can be declared legally dead. So I suppose the government, I don't know what their motivation was. I suppose because it was, the worst sort of terrorist attack on US soil in history. I suppose they felt like they needed to come up with an adequate response to honour the people that died and the families and friends and loved ones of those left behind. I mean, there's a cynical voice in my head that thinks, do they want to make sure that any insurance claims, or because there are all sorts of government assistance things to the victims' families, and I don't know, maybe that, and this is how conspiracy theories get born. I suppose people just
Yeah.
like thinking things out loud.
But like, I think it was really tied to sort of a display of patriotism, kind of like leave no person behind kind of vibe. Like, we're going to show these people that we're going to honor our dead and we're going to account for everybody. And it's like a form of, like national pride or something in finding everybody's remains and accounting for them. But
Yeah,
they I think they got down to like over 1,000 people still unidentified or unaccounted for. Sorry, not
really.
identified. But then there was some construction work happening on a nearby building, and they found human bone fragments on top of the building.
Oh,
Like,
right.
and it turned out to be over 100 different people on top of this building, and I think it was the passengers from one of the planes.
Oh, really?
So,
God, that's so
this
grim,
is
isn't it? It's
quite
so
grim, but
grim.
obviously their bodies were destroyed in the impact, but the fragments fell in tiny particles onto the top of this building. And so they researched after they found this is not that long ago. They started searching the area and they started finding other fragments and particles around different building blocks away. And I think there's still a couple of hundred people still unaccounted for. But I just find the science of that incredible. And you think in 20 to 25 years, how much the science of DNA analysis would have changed. So they
Yeah.
said originally they were doing everything by hand with like little dusters and like tweezers. And now they've got these machines that can sort DNA from
Right.
particles,
So
can
you literally
amplify.
just like put all the debris in the machine and it sorts it and analyzes
Yeah.
it and
So, like,
separates
the
it.
further we get away from that date in 2001, the better the technology is at solving these sorts of problems.
Um, was it just focusing on the attacks in New York? Because everyone says 9/11, and no, people often forget about the flight in DC. The one that hit the Pentagon, and then there was the other one. Remember, there was one that came down in rural Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well, this episode that I watched of 60 Minutes, it was just really talking about the Twin Towers. But
Hmm.
what was interesting for me was that there are people who have asked not to be told if
Oh, really?
the
Okay.
DNA of their family or loved ones or friends is located. And
Yeah.
I don't know, they didn't really go into the reasoning for that. Like, they didn't speak to anybody on camera who made
Hmm.
that request. But what do you think might be behind the request not to know?
Well, I mean, it's just a trauma response, isn't it? That in order to get your head around something like that, or maybe in order to not process or not deal with it, maybe you just, for some people, it's easier, or it seems easier at the time, to maybe sort of lock that event and that period of their life away and never visit it again. And that, I mean, I can't think of any other reason why. I mean, I don't know. I suppose actually after 5 years, you might just think, okay, I've spent enough time grieving, mourning, processing, etc., and I just need to move on, and I can't entertain that thought anymore about, because I suppose without concrete evidence, would there still be a tiny, tiny percent of your, heart, soul, mind, whatever, holding out hope that that person might still be somehow alive somewhere, have lost their memory, don't know who they are, that sort of thing. I don't know.
But do you think maybe it's to do with there's comfort in the mystery, in that
Oh, I
you don't
see.
actually have to think about the horrible thing that happened. It remains a broader mystery of like a catastrophe. But if you hear these fragments were found, pulverized on top of a
On a
building three
building
blocks
5 blocks
away,
away, yeah,
it
you have
might
to
be like
think about.
your brain then has to try and process the logistics of how that happened to that person you love.
Yeah,
And that might
that's
be a
true.
very difficult thing for people to go through. But they interviewed this man who's they found the handbag of his daughter, and um, it was dirty, but they found it pretty much intact, and it had her flip phone in it. It had her photo ID that it was her first day going to the buildings for work, and her glasses were in the bag, and it was like a handbag. And they gave it to him, and he was so traumatized and didn't know what to do. And his wife, he was still married to this woman's mother as well, and he hid it in a drawer in their house for 7 years. He couldn't bring himself to tell his wife,
Oh, really?
and he couldn't believe, he didn't know how to tell her, and he lived with the guilt of even having the bag. And
Hmm.
they didn't have, at this point, didn't have their daughter's identified remains. It was just this
Just a
handbag.
handbag, right?
And I think eventually he did tell his wife, and they decided together to donate it to like the Ground Zero Museum or whatever it's called. But what's fascinating is down there in, where they have that big fountain and like the memorial,
Hmm.
there is a room where it's like the family and friends and family room, where there are unidentified remains and fragments, almost like a library, like in a laboratory sort of library with sliding doors and drawers. And it's massive, and it's all underground,
Hmm.
and it's only accessible to people working there. But they have a room, like a family room, where you have to get signed in and prove that you're a relative, a living relative of a victim. And you go and you sit in this room with the glass window looking into the room where people are working on the remains and where it's all stored. And it's like a contemplation room or a quiet
Hmm.
room. And apparently it's going to be like that forever. And there are family members that go multiple times a year to go and just sit in there and look. It's
Wow.
a very, I don't know, it's a very peculiar thing that's happened. I mean, it's, I think, without precedent. Not the amount of people that were killed. Obviously, people are killed in conflicts and attacks, going back to the beginning of humankind. But the
Hmm.
way that it was reported and weirdly commemorated, I don't want to say celebrated, and the all of the emotional, um, what do you call it, where it's like all of the media sensation around it. I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was the first attack of that size, or yeah, first event of that size to be sort of live broadcast, I think, on TV. And so it just naturally had a much bigger impact than anything that had come before, and pretty much anything that's happened since. I think. I don't think there's. I'm sure there will be at some point, but I don't think there's been anything that's sort of unfolded live on TV like that um, in such a short amount of time. Um,
And
but yeah,
and
it's really sad, isn't it? It's really depressing.
yeah,
Um,
but it gets me thinking about. I want to be sensitive here, but the the lack of care or remorse or commemoration of other mass killings of people, civilians around the world, that people just don't even pay any attention to. And
mhm.
here I am, nearly 25 years later. There are so many documentaries and news channels talking about 9/11, while thousands of people, more than were killed in 9/11, being killed in Gaza.
Mhm.
And we don't sort of, I mean, it's not even on the news anymore. It's like you don't
Yeah.
even, maybe here and there, but it's not talked about.
Hmm.
And how easily people detach from what's going on. And obviously, it's like suppose like a white centric or Eurocentric thing as well, because we live in what we refer to as Western societies. There's a
Hmm.
lot of focus given to tragedy that strikes people who either look like us or live
Hmm.
like us.
Hmm.
But what's
Well, I
going
think it
on
just, I feel like, excuse me, I feel like I'm probably not qualified enough to do it justice, but I do think that 9/11, the attacks really did, they just came at the exact sort of point in modern human history that they really tapped into so many things because, I mean, there are obviously some people who believe they were orchestrated by the government and stuff like that. Like there's all those sort of conspiracy theories out there, but whether or not they were, I think they did tap into a growing. I don't know. See, this is it. I haven't thought about this properly, but a growing kind of dissatisfaction or distrust, or a
Yeah.
growing dissent of globalization. And I mean, so many things. Like you need to talk to a sociologist, I think, but things like the growth of Islam and all the Islamophobia that has caused in quote unquote Western Judeo-Christian countries, and it just tapped into so many different things, that it became like what do they say, the cause celeb, the sort of, it became a poster issue for a whole host of other things which don't get the discussion or discourse or investigation or documentaries that perhaps they should, because it's easier to focus on the big, the big ticket things like 9/11.
But
Um,
you think before 9/11 happened, a lot of what was fed to us as things to remember or commemorate, or things to be remind remindful of why we have freedom or democracy, were things like communism
mhm,
and the Nazis, right?
mhm.
Like we were told these are the things that you should never forget. These are the things that changed human history. These were the enemies of democracy or freedom.
Yeah.
And now it's swung to, um, yeah, people talk about, like you're saying, about Islam and Muslims being sort of seen as the enemy of democracy. And we don't really, as a collective, talk much about communism or remembering Nazis, to the point where now mainstream politicians can almost celebrate the people that lead those regimes or those political setups.
Yeah. I
So
mean, I don't want to misquote him, but I think Trump has, said his name. I think Trump has said something about Hitler before, like, and again, I don't want to misquote him, but just somehow kind of lessening the severity of what Hitler did or who Hitler was.
yeah,
And yeah, and then obviously you've got Lone Scum and Steve Bannon, was it, who was doing a Nazi salute? Was it Steve
yeah,
Bannon who did it the other week?
I think so. Yeah,
Beeve Stannon. Um, yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, we have short memories as a species, as a global community. Um,
like I
and
was
like you
talk.
think, sorry, just to say also, you think about all the people that died of AIDS-related illnesses during the 80s and 90s, and still today, to a lesser extent, obviously, but and that was never really, at the time, particularly, it was never given the seriousness or the gravitas that things like 9/11 are given and have been given. You think of all of the other massacres like that have gone on in the world, and not
Yeah,
getting the same sort of attention. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it tapped into so many different things at the right time, and maybe that's why it has given rise to so many conspiracy theories, because it in a way, I mean, this sounds very cynical and heartless, and I don't mean it to be, but you could see how some people would say it was the perfect event at the perfect time in order to get a certain response in American society.
And
So,
with a few years after 9/11, YouTube started. Like, YouTube started in 2005.
okay.
And that was kind of like it gave it a new lease of life. So there had been
Mm,
the technology to record the events, but there hadn't been the mass platforms really to share the content that people
mm,
captured. So a
mm,
few years after, when it was still fresh in the memories of people, all of this content started being disseminated around the globe, and people were able to relive it. And I think that kept it alive in
mm,
public discourse in a way that it possibly wouldn't have if
mm,
YouTube hadn't existed. And
mm.
so, even now, nearly 25 years later, I mean, I can't imagine how many videos are on YouTube, like serious news reports, fake conspiracy videos, people's
Opinion
just personal
pieces.
retellings of
Hmm.
their memories, people who weren't even there just doing videos about what they felt like when they saw it on the news. I mean, you could watch a video nonstop for the rest of your life and never run out of content
Yeah,
about
yeah.
9
All the
11.
professional and semi-professional documentaries and conspiracy videos about it. Yeah, like it would just go on and on and on indefinitely.
Yeah. And it really tied into or played into that political discourse of us versus them and black and white, not only with America versus the world, but within the US political system, and about Democrats versus Republicans. And
Yeah, it was a
it
polarizing event, wasn't it?
yeah, it just, people thought they had to take sides, and it was used by politicians to get people to take sides.
Yeah.
But the um like with YouTube, I think at least there seemed to be some sort of, it must have been some sort of vetting process with what got on YouTube, because obviously they wouldn't let people post videos of like people jumping out of windows and stuff. I mean, from a distance, but
Yeah.
apparently there are a lot of videos where people are filming bodies hitting the ground or the roofs.
Oh,
But
right.
I mean, if it happened now with the way Twitter is, or X is, so unfiltered and
Yeah.
unregulated, could you imagine the content that would be out now
Yeah.
if it happened now?
Do you know, I was talking about this with Anna at the weekend. Sorry to changing tack slightly, but I was talking to Anna about depictions of violence and how desensitized we are. And I'm not just talking about how, when you log into X now, you'll be shown pictures of, people getting electrocuted or whatever. Anyway, it's just horrible. But even in terms of, um, that we were talking about Stranger Things. And, anyone that watches Stranger Things knows, of course, that none of it's real. But the special effects are so good now. Like they're so, I mean, and that was what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago that Stranger Things was made. So it's gotten even better since. And the special effects are so realistic now that it must be doing something to our minds, to our brains, to make us desensitized to gore and violence. Because that's right, because Anna and I watched The Substance. I don't know, have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
And it was good. And but it was very gory, like very, very gory in parts. And we're just also desensitized to it now, I think. And I think about my like nieces and young people growing up
Yeah,
seeing this sort of thing, and it does make me a little bit concerned about what it's doing to us, you know. And so yeah, like you say now, things like those video video footage of people jumping from buildings or hitting the ground and stuff, which couldn't be shown at the time. I think now it might not be as shocking to us, and that says a lot, really, doesn't it, about where we've gotten to as a society. Um,
yeah.
it's grim. It's pretty grim, and
But
it
YouTube is a great resource, I think, but it's also kind of the enemy for people who, like me, who procrastinate or look for instant gratification or look for dopamine hits.
Dopamine mining.
And
Yeah.
I wonder if, obviously, like, it's a symptom of me needing that, but I wonder if it also enhances the need. Do you know, like, it's like the chicken and the vegan speckled egg problem. Like, what came first? So, is it like, does it create more of those tendencies in me, or is it just feeding the tendencies that I already have? And there's a limit to what I'm going to be like with needing instant gratification or videos like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's. I think you'd have to do some sort of social experiment to find out, like a complete digital detox.
Yeah. And, I watched another video. I won't go too much into it because um, don't want to be accused of being too negative on the pod, Sue,
Oh
by
yeah.
some of our
Yes.
listeners. But it was a story of a childhood abuse survivor telling his story. And it was a very, very grueling story to listen to. But I feel often listening to those stories, it's very important to hear people if they put themselves out there to share their story. Like I believe in the power of listening to survivors
Hmm.
of abuse and honoring their story.
Hmm.
And also I find, as a somebody who's lived through different types of abuse myself through my life, I often find helpful things. I don't know if you find that, like, if you've had something traumatic happen in your life, if you
Mm.
can hear somebody else talk about how they survived it, if you find that helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I suppose it's very much depends on the context and your own personal history. But yeah, I do find survivor stories very, grueling but inspiring often.
And it was, this video that I watched, it was long and it was grueling and it was upsetting, but it was interesting. I wouldn't say it was like an enjoyable watch, but it got me thinking. This person who spoke, this man who spoke, is now an activist, speaking for people who survived childhood trauma. But when I went to look at his social media, there was a tweet from last year where he said that he voted for Donald Trump. And, obviously, like, I don't sit in judgment of him. Like, but he also tried to negate some of it by saying, look, I'm not a fan of his. I don't think he's perfect, but it's the best we've got at the moment. And I thought, who is thinking that man is the best they've got? Like, how am I
Well,
missing
I don't.
something here?
How old is this guy now?
I think he's in his early 30s.
Okay, because I just read a statistic yesterday. Over half of men under 29 voted for Trump
Yeah,
in the
he
last
probably would
election.
have been that age
So
when he
yeah.
voted.
So I mean, statistically, I mean, yeah, he's got a more than 50% chance of having voted for him anyway. But yeah, I don't, I don't know. I don't. We've only got, like, 20 or so minutes left, and we need to maybe not get into the whole political situation in the US, because this episode's already been quite, depressing and negative. So, well, not negative. I don't want to associate the telling of traumatic events as something negative. I think it's important that we do tell those
Yeah.
stories. Just very, it's been a bit grueling to tell them. I, just having said that, I do worry that we tell the survivor stories because they make good stories, and whether it's a nature or nurture thing, I think humans love stories.
Yeah.
That's how we relate to the world around us and the people around us, is through stories. That's why stories have always been popular in whatever form that is, like whether spoken, oral history, books, films, whatever, TV,
Hmm.
songs, of course. Um, but I do worry that we only tell the ones we want to remember, or so often we tell the ones we want to remember.
Well, I think they're the
Um,
ones we remember hearing. I mean, we started this podcast talking about the joy of that Dolly Parton um, impersonator, and we loved Dolly, and you had a great time, and queer Joy, the lesbian couples, and you had a great time with Anna, and that was the first part of this. But I think people, watching this will probably remember us talking about 9/11 for a similar amount of time
Mm-hmm.
because it's what imprints on us the most, isn't it?
Yeah, but
We,
I
for some
suppose my
reason,
concern is that so many people's stories get forgotten in history, don't they? And that's just the nature of it. I mean, there's nothing we can really do. But if somebody, you know, survives a traumatic event and then goes on to, survives an abusive situation and then goes on to, I don't know, take their own life, for example, or if they go on to become an abuser themselves, which does happen, their story doesn't get told. And I'm not saying it should or it shouldn't. It's I just find it interesting
well,
how.
I think from an audience consumption point of view, we want to position ourselves as the victors in things. We want to watch
Mm,
things where there's a way out, or this is how I would have done it, or oh, I can take those lessons learned by that person and I would do it this way. So we try and take these stories and
do we need?
similarly how people will try and relive their childhood trauma to try and make it better or to do it correctly. I think we watch and consume media that we think will help us. It ties into that survival instinct or self-preservation gene that we have as
Mm.
mammals,
Well,
that we want to see these survival stories
I was
because
just going to say we need hope, don't we? We need hope in our brains, in our hearts, in our society,
well,
and
if you want to talk about no hope, I was also watching a YouTube video about the end of the universe and what it will be like.
oh my
And
god,
it
have you got
really,
anything? Have you got anything positive to talk about today, Sean?
well, Stedman from Five Star died.
Yeah, that's the only other thing on my list, and I was thinking I can't bring that up now after talking about all this other stuff.
Poor old
Um,
Stedman. He was like 60 years old.
I know it was very, very
So,
young.
for people who don't know, Five Star were a pop band who were big in the 80s, primarily in the UK. They were based in the UK. They had some
Haven't
minor
we?
hits in.
Haven't we spoken about? We've spoken about them on the pod before.
Yeah, but and because we told the story about how you were a massive fan and you used to go and hang outside their house and their family compound,
I mean, I
and
I did it like twice or three times. I mean, it wasn't something I did every day or something, but yeah.
and they were seen as sort of like the UK's version of the Jacksons because they were all siblings. There were five people in the group. They were all black, and the sound of the music was a little bit Jackson-esque, but like not Jackson 5 sounding, but like around the time when like Reby and Jermaine were all having hits in the 80s. So it was like that sort of disco funk sound.
Yeah, it was like a sort of pop with a slight R&B kind of soul-y kind of vibe to it. I wouldn't say it was that similar to what the Jacksons were doing though.
Oh yeah, you if you listen to like the Jacksons in the 80s,
Hmm.
even some of the tracks off Thriller and stuff or off the wall, but like the Jacksons, like yeah, definitely, and like they even the vocal arrangements and stuff are really similar. It was like a copy of the Jacksons, but a lot of other people were doing as well. It wasn't just they were completely just copying the Jacksons. But yeah, that time in the 80s, the early to mid 80s, what the Jacksons sounded like
Hmm.
Five Star.
Yeah.
But Five Star were massive for a short amount of time, right? Like a couple of years.
Hmm.
So, but you were very young when you got into them because I was playing that record. I've got the 7 inch of System Addict,
Hmm.
and I was playing it, and I looked at it. It was like 1985, and I was like, "Well,
Yeah.
you would have only been what 8 years old, or
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, IIRC, um, I believe I got into them a bit later, like around 86, 87. So, like, after their second album came out, because their first album, Luxury of Life, I think I bought that, years after it came out. I don't think
Mhm.
I'd gotten into them when that first album came out. I think I only got into their second album, Strong as Steel, I think it was. And or Silk and Steel. And I think, yeah, it was about 86, maybe 87.
Yeah.
87 is when I saw them in concert for the first time at Wembley Arena. Um, but yeah, it
But I mean,
was
around that time, wouldn't they have been kind of on the way out? Like,
a little bit, because I'm just trying to think, what was their third album? Anyway, I'll have to go back and look at their discography. But yeah, I think their third album didn't do as well, and then I think it was their, I don't know, actually, I could be completely wrong. I think their third album did okay, not as well as the first two, and then it was the fourth album, Rock My World, I think, which just totally bombed. And they'd gone with a completely new look. They were sort of trying to be, I don't know, it was weird. They were trying to be rocky. They started wearing like leather. It was a very odd move. Um,
that's what like Latoya Jackson looked like, and that's what that was kind of like that vibe at the
yeah,
time, and
yeah.
yeah, they were really going for that, and like Stedman, who just passed away, he was the oldest member of the band, right?
I think so. I don't know actually. I can't. I don't really. I think Doris was the youngest. I remember
And
Doris
so
being the baby.
Stedman was very camp and presented as like a gay person, and
Well, in later life he did. Yeah, when he was younger, not so much.
well, you don't think
I
so?
think
I
he had
think
no.
he was
I think he had
quite
so much
camp.
internalized homophobia when he was young. So I
But
don't.
he, on that B side of Systematic, it's an instrumental song that he wrote on his own. He's got solo writing credits on that. Um,
Right.
so that was interesting to me because I didn't know that, but it wasn't much of a song. It was just like music. But um, in 1990, he was arrested for cruising for sex in a public toilet, which is known as cottaging in the UK. And he appeared in court. What was the outcome of that court case? Do you remember?
I don't know. It was all very hushed. I don't recall what happened.
Well, not long after that, the entire family moved to the US.
That's right. I think they fragmented. I think some moved to the US and some didn't. Um, yeah.
And at the time, though, I remember them in the press. It was like, oh, we've moved to the US and we've shipped all our cars because they lived a very flashy lifestyle here in England because they made a lot of money very quickly.
Mhm.
And they said they shipped all of their clothes and all of their cars and everything to the US, but then the press found out actually they had to sell it all because they'd run out of money.
Mm.
And it was, and then with him being arrested for whatever the charge was, lewd misconduct or whatever it was kind of like the end of it. Like there wasn't really a way they were going to come back from that, especially with how homophobic the press was around 1990 in the UK
Oh
and
God, yeah,
globally.
yeah.
And then he kind of, I mean, they never really were famous again after that, were they? Like, I
No.
think Denise was it on one of those singing reality TV shows.
Yeah. And I think she's done a few. I think she did The Masked Singer, but I think before that she did The Voice.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah, and
then Stedman was on some sort of reality show about dancing or something, was he? Or
mostly I don't know. I haven't followed their individual careers. Or they did do a comeback show. I don't know how long ago, several years ago. I've seen footage of that. And Denise still performs fairly regularly in London, I think, and has released some solo music, which wasn't to my liking. But
would,
um,
would you go see her?
would I? I don't know. I don't know because yeah, I mean, I was a fast 5-star fan, but then they quickly fell out of favor. And I think I've told the story on here before, haven't I, about how I sold my 5-star records to buy a ticket for the Dick Tracy sort of, not the premiere, but like one of the first screenings of Dick Tracy. Have I told that story? I'm sure I have. So I was
and
with
and
my
for people who don't know, Dick Tracy was the movie adaptation by Warren Beatty that starred Madonna, and it came out in 1990. 1990 or 91?
I would say
1990.
90.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 90. And So I had already kind of, my musical taste had moved on, and Five Star had kind of fallen out of favor with me and, well, with most people by that point. And so I'd moved on to, Madonna and, I don't know, Debbie Gibson.
Shakespeare's sister.
Shakespeare. No, I think not quite Shakespeare's sister yet, perhaps. And I remember I didn't, how old would I have been then? 14, 13? And I didn't have any money. And so I wanted to buy a ticket to go and see Dick Tracy. And I decided to sell not all of my records, but a lot of my records. And so there was this place in Notting Hill called the Record Exchange, I think. And I took them all up there, and you could just go and sell your records and get either cash or get credit to spend in store. And I went, and I don't know if I'm misremembering it because that's what our memory does, but in my mind, it was this very, very cool kind of punky looking woman behind the counter with like a cigarette dangling from her lips. But maybe that's just my overactive memory. But I remember she kind of looked through my records and sort of raised an eyebrow when she got to the Five Star ones, as if to sort of like, mock or scorn this poor chubby 13-year-old queer kid. And I said to her, "Oh, that one is signed by the band." And she just looked at me and she said, "I don't think that's going to make a difference, love." Poor Five Star.
Yeah, I mean,
they're famous. They're probably most famous now. It's really sad, actually. They're probably most famous now for they were on a live TV show. I think it was Sarah Green, the TV presenter, and Philip Schofield, perhaps. Anyway, they were on this live TV show, and there was a phone in where fans could call in and ask some questions. So someone got through, and when they were on air, this person on the phone was like, "I just want to know, why are you all so shit?" It was really awful. It was really sad.
It's weird though, right? We were talking about how I got a ticket to see Five, and they've sort of come back. They've sold out arena tours. Like Steps came back and have done multiple tours and sold a lot of records. Five Star just never got they became so uncool that there was no coming back. They couldn't even get booked on like these retro tours or, where people go and.
I think they could have. I think they didn't want to, was the issue. And I think they were living all in different parts of the world now. So I think that was more the issue. I think they could have if they had if they had an agent or management that was talking to what are those retro tours called? Like, there are some that are really famous. But anyway, like if they had talks, I'm sure they could have gotten a deal to go on those.
But they couldn't have had much money. Like, I mean, Stedman must have died with not a lot of money, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that, when you were talking about just before about how they said they had to sell all they moved all their cars and clothes or whatever to the US, and I was thinking, yeah, like they were successful, but then knowing what I know of the music industry, particularly in the 80s, artists did not get a lot of money. I mean, they might get a big advance, but then they would be, beholden to the record company for eternity. And yeah, I don't know where they got that money from, really. Because they did have flashy lives. They had this huge mansion, is it called Greystone Manor or Grey? I don't know. Anyway.
Greystone Manor.
Yeah. But they had this huge mansion. They had these flashy sports cars. Yeah, I don't know.
And that's the weird thing. Like, they were big, but they weren't the biggest. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't even, like, take that level, were they? Like,
no.
Like,
no.
They just had a couple of top 10 hits. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And, like, the records didn't sell that much.
And it was very localized as well. I don't think they had much of an audience outside of the UK.
No, I think, wasn't there some drama with their dad? Like, that story is old as time where he maybe misappropriated funds or...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I'd forgotten that. Buster Pearson.
Yeah, got business loans off the back of them or saying that, oh, we'll do all this and then we'll pay you back. And he borrowed a lot of money from people. And that's how
I have heard that.
Front. Is he still alive, Buster?
I don't. Oh, no, actually, I don't think he is. Because I did during COVID, I was listening to hours and hours of podcasts. I think I listened to an interview with, I think it was with, I don't know, I don't think it was Denise. It was either Lorraine or Doris. It's one of the other sisters. I think it was Doris. And I think she said that the loss of their dad had been really hard for them because he was like he was such a strong figure in their lives. So I think he's no longer around. And Dolores, there's their mum. I don't know if she's still around.
Okay. And so with like their music, it also strikes me as a lot of it wasn't great, but they had some good pop songs. I think that's probably one of the reasons why there hasn't been a lot of longevity with their like legacy. Like people don't, like you might play "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" or on a retro radio station, or you might play a Human League song or whatever. The Five Star songs just didn't seem as timeless. They seemed very, very dated. If you hear them,
they didn't age very well, I suppose. But they had a few really
if
good
you
songs.
had to like name, say, 3 5-star songs for people who are not familiar to go and listen to hear what the vibe was, what would you recommend?
I would say Rain or Shine, probably number one. I really like Strong as Steel, and then of course I've learned, later in life that song's been done by like what's her name, in the Australian singer,
Tina Arena.
Tina Arena did that song as well. Rain or Shine, Systematic is kind of camp and silly, but I love it. I don't know, it's hard.
Well, that's 3, and I suppose they're the 3 that come to mind.
Yeah.
They weren't big in Australia. Like I only kind of knew them because I used to buy the pop magazines or steal the pop magazines, like Smash Hits, to see what was happening with pop singers that I liked, like Morrissey and Madonna or whatever. And I used to always read about 5 Star, but before the internet, you couldn't hear music unless you bought it, or the radio was playing it, and the radio stations were not playing 5 Star in Australia. So
no.
I didn't really hear 5 Star until much later in my life. Even though I knew about them.
Now I've got there was like a little rap thing, like a spoken bit in, what's that song? Is it I Can Make You Number One? Or maybe it's called Number One. I think it's on the first album, and now I've just got that going through my head. So
that's not a Princess song, is it? What was that Princess song?
Oh yeah, she had a song, didn't she? No, it wasn't that. It was a different song.
Where was Stedman arrested? Like, where were the toilets during?
I don't know, because I mean, it happened pre-internet. It was. I have
a feeling it might have been New Malden.
Really?
I have a feeling, but like, is that near where they lived, or what was he doing in New Malden? Where is
towards New Malden's like between Kingston and Wimbledon. It's on the south side of Richmond Park, I think.
Yeah, or maybe it was there. I don't know. Maybe I read that online or something.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure it's all there on the internet somewhere if you look hard enough.
And anyway.
Well, anyway, let's not talk about anything.
to Stedman Pearson.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I've got a silly, trivial thing to ask you. How much do you think I should tip my barber? Like, how much do you tip your barber?
Well, I think it depends on how much the cost of the service is. So how much do you pay for your haircut?
Well, yesterday I paid £14 for a beard trim.
Yeah.
Which I think is expensive, but anyway. £14 for a beard trim.
Come to the City of London soon, and then you'll know what expensive is.
And I tipped £1. And I don't know if that's cheap of me.
Well, it's not even 10%. So yeah, it seems quite cheap.
Yeah. I don't know. And also, yeah. Sorry, I'll ask. I will listen to your answer in a minute, but just let me add a second part to the question. What's the deal now? When you go into a restaurant and you order on a screen, and at the end, so it's all self-service, and it says, "Do you want a tip?" And I mean, I often do, but I'll do like the minimum 10%, because there's a part of me that's just like, of course I want people to get a decent wage, but I don't know. I just have this. I suppose it's like just something that's ingrained in me that like self-service things don't warrant a tip. Whereas
I suppose you're also tipping for the people making your food,
Well,
right?
yeah, and that's the reason I do it now. Is not from an altruistic thing. I do it because I'm like, I don't want them to spit or pick their nose and wipe it in my food.
Well, I don't
Like,
know if they would do that, but
well, I don't know, but I know people who have what I mean. I'm talking 20 years ago, who work in fast food places who would do stuff like that.
was it
So
Stedman from Five Star?
I can't say for legal reasons. No, it wasn't Stedman.
Well, my people are going to be very shocked by the amount I pay to get my hair cut and my beard trimmed because it's a barber near me. Around here, where I live in the city of London, like which is the financial district of London, it is all barbers that are aimed at people who work in finance and banks and stuff. So they charge a lot more, but you get these like, hot towel service and face massage, and you don't have an option to tell them you don't want it. Like if you want to go there, you that's the service. So my haircut is £45.
What?
And
You're joking.
that's the haircut, that's the beard trim, that's the hot towels, that's the
Do
shaping of
they
it.
do they bleach your asshole for that as well?
Yeah.
That's
And
outrageous. £45, and so you have to tip what,
yeah, I
£5?
tip for five on top
That's
of that.
outrageous.
So,
Wouldn't it be cheaper for you to like get the train out to Brentford, where I live, and get it
yeah,
done
but
here?
this I think we spoke about this like quite a few episodes ago. You often go to the barber when you're pressed for time.
Yeah,
Like it's one
yeah.
of those things you put off and you think, I'll just quickly go now, or I'll see if they've got availability, they can squeeze me in as I'm going past. And
Mm.
all of the barbers around here are at about that price. So you wouldn't get a haircut for under 30 quid, plus the beard trim on top. So I even went to one. I made a mistake of going to one on Old Street, and it was just the basic was over 50, like it was 55 or something. I never went back there because it was just too much.
Mm.
But that's what it is. And then I think, well, they have to rent a shop in the City of London. What are the business rates and the rent going to be on that? They have to pay themselves a wage. I can't expect them to do it for 10 quid, can I? But
No,
saying
but
that, like, Hill goes to this cheap, cheap and cheerful hairdressing salon in Soho.
mm.
I think it's called Splash. And his is about 13 or 14 pounds for
Oh
his
wow.
haircut. And
Why
he's
don't you
been
go
going
there?
there since, you know, we've lived in London because it's
Is
just
that just
so
because
cheap.
where he works close to there as well, so he can just do it on his way home or whatever?
And also, we used to live around the corner from it.
Mm.
But he thinks that's expensive because, in Mexico, he could go and spend a couple of quid to get his haircut.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
here he thinks what he's paying is outrageous. So I don't think I've even told him what I pay because I'm just so, like, not embarrassed, but it's just so shocking.
It is shocking. It is shocking. I'm a gasp.
But see, I don't have anything like Big Jim's trims or any
A
of
gasp
those
or a ghast? It's a ghast, isn't it? With a T.
aghast, aghast.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything like Big Jim's trims or any of those cheaper
Well,
or
they're not even
medium
that
price.
cheap anymore, I don't think. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of probably medium price compared to what I pay. And that said, like my barbers aren't the most expensive. Like there are some others around here where I look at their price list on the wall and it's outrageous. So
I mean, I wish I could afford to have like one of those nice pamper ones where they do the hot towel and
yeah.
they let you sit there and steam your face for a few
Well,
minutes before they
that's
shave.
what mine is. And so
Oh, really?
mine like they get the flame and they with the
Oh,
live flame burn the hair off my ears.
yeah, no, I
And
don't have that. There was, do you know, it's probably a bit too far for you to go, but there used to be a really good place I went to when I worked for the American University in London, and Boswell Street, which is just off Queen's Square in Bloomsbury, Boswell Street Barbers. That was a really good place, like really, really good service, reasonably priced.
But do you think the prices will be the same from when you used to go then? How long
No, I
ago
mean,
was it?
obviously they'll have gone up, as has everything in the UK, but
Yeah.
I remember them being reasonable at the time. So anyway, maybe I should treat myself. But yeah, they used to do the towel thing. They used to do the lot, burn your ears.
I just have to tell you this because we're not going to talk about it now. There's no time, but this documentary I watched about the end of the universe,
Oh yeah, sorry.
and it was
Yeah,
with do you know Professor Brian Cox? So
Yes.
not Brian Cox, who we were talking about the other day, who was
No,
defending
not the
Kevin
actor.
Spacey. But in this episode, it had a voiceover from him. It's this show called Wonders of the Universe, and it talked about how the
I think
universe
I
is
watched some of that.
well. It
And he
talked
goes
about
to all different places on Earth, which kind of mirror environments on other planets and moons and stuff, right?
maybe that was one of the episodes. Maybe the episode I watched wasn't. But it talked about what stage we are in the life of the universe or the cosmos, and it was saying that we're not even like a pinprick into the lifespan of the universe. Like it was like you couldn't even imagine how minuscule amount of time has passed since the creation of the universe compared to the end. And so they zoomed through, like did a time lapse of the lifespan of the universe and the cosmos and what it would look like, and it blew my mind. And obviously it's all what scientists imagine it will be like or have worked out or calculated what it will be like. But they got so far into the future that they said it's an amount of time that is unfathomable, almost unimaginable to humans. But it was like something like 100 billion trillion, whatever the amount of time was. And all these things had happened in the universe. And these black holes had swallowed other black holes. And then all this stuff had happened until it became so chaotic and that even atoms broke apart and that there was nothing. Like there was now no longer anything. There was no disorder in the universe. Entropy had ended. There was nothing. And there was no possible chance for life to exist because there was not even atoms anymore. They had disintegrated to nothingness. And this quote from Brian Cox where he said, for the first time in its life, the universe will be permanent and unchanging. Entropy will finally stop increasing because the cosmos cannot get any more disordered. Nothing happens, and it keeps not happening forever. And that quote, nothing happens and it keeps not happening forever, I can't stop thinking about it. Like it's just stuck in my brain. And just to think like how all of these problems that we moan about on here and, everything that we talk about, like 9/11 and 5-star toilet arrest and the dump and like Lone Scum, all of that, how insignificant everything is that we talk about when you think that we're not even one pinprick in the lifespan of a cosmos that one day is not going to exist.
Yeah.
Is that intense?
It's I don't know. In some ways I find it comforting. In other ways I find it terrifying. You know? I don't know.
Just like we can't conceive of nothingness, like of nothing.
No, and also we can't conceive of the endless, limitless quality of the universe. Like we talk about the universe, like it's one single entity that is sort of surrounded or encapsulated within something, but it's not. It just goes on and on infinitely in time and space.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I would say to Brian Cox, did we not learn from Jurassic Park that life finds a way?
Well, one day it will not find a way because
that's what he thinks, but you never know. You never know.
Anyway,
well,
I think that's the end of this episode. So we've gone on a bit of a roller coaster ride about abuse and terrorism and pop stars and death and the eventual death of every known atom. So I think that's the kind of like wraps up.
the price of haircuts and beard trims in London today. I mean, it's taken kind of in
a good cross section of like what we think and talk about normally, really, isn't it?
Well, that's the whole premise of this podcast, isn't it? It's just an intimate conversation between two friends who happen to record it for YouTube and Spotify.
Okay, well, everyone go and listen. What's that?
Now, speaking of which, please do subscribe and tell your friends. If you like this podcast, or even if you don't like the podcast, share it with your friends. Let us know.
Well, some people might very well be hate watching. You know how there's that, like, that's a whole thing where people watch stuff that they can't stand because it gives them that negative emotion we were talking about, like they can react against it or rally against it. So if you are hate watching, welcome to the pod. It's
Thank you.
great to have you with us.
Thank you for your viewership, hate watchers, hate listeners,
and hate subscribe.
Yeah,
and hate thumbs up. So well, wonderful to be here again in this slowly dying universe with you. And what are you doing for the rest of the day? Anything exciting?
Not that exciting. Laundry. I'm meeting up with my friend Blake because it's a long story. I don't have time to get into it now. But anyway, what about you?
Work meetings and fundraising and stuff for the charities. If anyone wants to come along to a really fun supper club that I'm hosting in May, it's at Downs, the vegan Scandinavian restaurant, and we're raising funds for Made in Hackney, the vegan food security charity that I work for. So buy a ticket, click on the link in this video description. There's a link tree with all of my links, and there's a link in there for the event.
And you can find Sean's blog there as well, thatgayvegan.com. You can find my website and my music there, joshandthejumpstarts.com. So please do click through, listen, subscribe, like, follow, etc., etc. Otherwise, we'll be back with more Universal Mysteries next week.
Okay.
Till then, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.